writing this from prison. 2 weeks ago, I beat a man to death. It was broad daylight, there were plenty of witnesses. The gas station cameras caught everything. I see no reason to deny what happened. What was his crime? Well, he made fun of my scars. When I confronted him, he threw a slushie at me. In response, I beat his face to a bloody pulp with my fists. Did he deserve it? Probably not. Didn't know the guy. Was it a crime of passion? Well, in theory, yes. The whole situation, however, is a bit more complicated. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. Lord knows I'll probably get the injection. I've only come back to this dark corner of the internet to explain myself. As I said, the events of that afternoon are complicated. Before I moved to Florida, I used to work in private security. For simplicity's sake, let's say I was a security contractor at a research facility in Antarctica. You know, it's big and cold out there, but I'm pretty sure you don't know the extent of either of those adjectives. The facility which we were protecting was a far cry away from any hint of civilization. That was by design. You don't set up shop in a frozen hellscape if you expect regular press conferences. Routine patrols around the vicinity of the lab would be conducted to ensure that no one was trying to get a peek, but the weather mainly kept those expeditions to the immediate surroundings. I went on nearly 100 of these security checks, and we never saw anything remotely suggesting human presence. All the guys would complain about the freezing temperatures and shit food, and that's just proper etiquette. You need to make conversation about something, and in the frozen wastes there isn't a lot of inspiration floating around. In truth, the job was easy. We'd gear up, trudge through the snow, and then spend most of our days drinking, complaining, and playing cards. In the late 2010s, the brass was cooking up something special. They wanted to be certain that there was no one anywhere near the facility that could spy on the research. There was the usual round of patrols around the direct perimeter of the base, but the bosses wanted us to check further. They wanted a team to go patrol an area that no one's been to for a solid 2 decades. Usually for an expedition that remote, we'd take a team of at least 7 people. The money from the trip would get split between the whole crew, and the paycheck would look no different than any other patrol. If the team was to be considerably smaller, however, payday will be worth the freeze. It might be the guilt that's given me selective memory, but I don't think it was my idea to run a skeleton crew. Regardless of who dreamed it up, it happened. We ran a team of 3, not including the Estonian who was in charge of the icebreaker. I knew the 2 others well, but we never spoke about family, and still don't know how much their kin know. I'd hate for them to find out through me, so, well, let's just call my 2 fellow travelers Red and Silver. Silver led the expedition. He'd been at the base years before I arrived and never spoke much. Didn't even know where he was from. Had the strangest accent that would bounce around all corners of the globe. All I knew of the man was that he enjoyed cigars and had spent 2 decades in the military of whatever mysterious place he'd come from. Red was our comms guy. Gutsy fella from somewhere in Latin America. Brazil, if I recall correctly. Few people complained about the cold as much as he did. No one was able to string together as many expletives while doing so, but he was a reliable man in a pinch. Silver and Red both had rifles, and I rounded up the group Remington in case something got too close to us. None of us were too concerned about the weaponry. We didn't expect to use it. Even Silver, who'd spent untold years out in the cold, had gone his entire career without shooting at anything mobile. The main thing we were concerned about was getting enough thermal protection to not lose a limb to frostbite. Well, the weather in Antarctica is never good, but when we left the base that morning, it was as normal as it gets. As we sailed beyond the borders of our usual patrol area, the wind started to pick up. By the time we were in fully uncharted territory, the world was a howling mess of snow and sleet. Well, the Estonian captain, as usual, didn't say a word. He just puffed on his pipe and worked at the machinery. The man was silent, but even in his stoic face I could see a twitch of anxiety. Silver, Red, and me weren't in particularly good spirits either. When the storm picked up, Red's comms started to struggle. When the true force of the tempest descended upon us, they went completely dead. For a couple of hours, the storm beat down on the icebreaker, and the ship swayed from side to side, and at times it seemed like we might actually capsize. Everyone kept their composure, but you could cut the tension in the cabin with a butter knife. When the skies finally cleared around noon, we all breathed a sigh of relief. In the calm waters, Red kept us occupied with tasteless jokes about the Titanic. And despite the storm, we were making the trip in good time. Nothing of note had appeared during the journey, and there was little land left to cover before we'd turn around and head back to base. Just as we started to consider the expedition finished, however, the Estonian summoned us to the viewing deck. There was something in the distance, a structure of dark metal which stood out in the white snow like a nun at a rave. Once we crossed the distance, the black metal took shape into a walkway. Off in the middle of nowhere, in a corner of the globe where one can't survive without millions of dollars worth of equipment, sat a dock. I'm not one for architecture, but Silver called the dock Gothic. All across the structure, there were imposing spires which reached up towards the sky like crooked black fingers, and the pathway itself was made of a jagged, unfriendly metal tile. Even though the skies were clear, Red's comms were still dead. There was no way for the team to call our findings in. Silver insisted that we immediately return back to base, tell the brass, and send a better equipped team to investigate. Red, being his usual reckless self, said we should at least see what's on the other end of the dock. The Estonian stayed silent, as he tended to do. I was the deciding vote. The mysterious pathway in the middle of the frozen wasteland didn't inspire my confidence, but my mind was quick to extrapolate what would happen if we returned back to base. The three of us would be told to rest. Another bigger expedition would be sent in our stead. We'd be paid out for a regular shift. It's the backup team that would get the bonus. Well, I wish I could say that it was Red who convinced me to continue with the patrol. That would lay the blame for what was to happen solely on his shoulders. Yet, lying to you, or myself for that matter, doesn't do anyone any good. I pushed for us to continue at my own behest. I convinced Silver to get off the icebreaker and onto the dark metal, not because I thought it was safe to do so. I convinced him because I had debts back home. The jagged footpath led us away from the ship and around a massive mountain of ice. On the other side of the frozen wall, the black metal connected up to a domed structure. The building, much like the path that led to it, was covered in spiky ornaments that reached out towards the heavens. As we approached the entrance of the structure, Silver once again suggested that we call in backup. Seeing the unexplainable building in the middle of nowhere filled me with a fair amount of unease, but by then I was already committed to getting my paycheck. The entry into the dome was tight with low ceilings. The bone-chilling cold of the outside world had seeped into the metal of the passageway. Although we were safe from the biting Antarctic wind, a frigid unease radiated from the black metal that surrounded us. At the end of the passage, the ceilings rose into a sort of lobby. The walls were covered by strange shapes that collapsed in on themselves in a show of eerie decor. At the center of the chamber stood a terrible statue. A bearded man with long hair made of black metal. The figure was covered in veiny muscle and wore a lab coat which barely covered its bulging form. There was a terrible scowl on the metal scientist's face, which implied a soul filled with rage and void of mercy. The statue towered above us like a monument to some cruel dead god. "Kneel before your professor," read the inscription beneath the statue. Silver once again voiced his discomfort. I was willing to argue with him as we approached the strange structure, but seeing the statue made me partial to a retreat as well. There was something in that cruel face, in the discomforting shape of the chamber around us, that filled me with dread. Even though we were all armed with well-tested weaponry, I felt patently unsafe. Just as I was about to agree with Silver's suggestion of retreat, however, Red took the initiative and ventured past the dark lobby of the structure. Cursing the young man's impatience, Silver and I followed. The metal dome rose above us and the floor gave way to pure ice. We were standing at the edge of a sort of arena the size of a football pitch. The ground was uneven and pocked with signs of impact and battle, yet the shape and size of the structure quickly became irrelevant. What captured our attention and filled my heart with another wave of discomfort was the frozen creature at the far end of the arena. A hippopotamus made of ice. I've only ever seen them in zoos when I was a child, but the creature was unmistakable. His body was fully made of frozen crystal, yet beyond its frozen skin sat dark blue clumps reminiscent of organs. The ice hippo's body was only halfway out of the ground, as if it had been frozen in place. Though the creature was immobile, its massive, translucent maw looked as if it could crush anything that was placed inside it. Silver and I demanded caution, yet Red would hear none of it. Immediately he rushed over to the ice hippo to investigate. He laughed and made jokes and tapped against the creature's dull teeth. He was deaf to all our warnings. The ice hippo was a curiosity to him. He thought it a frozen sculpture. And Silver saw it before I did. He raised his rifle and screamed at Red to back up, but by the time the words left his mouth, it was already too late. The clumps of dark blue in the ice hippo's skull started to pulsate with life. As if woken from hibernation, the crystalline beast started to move. Red pulled back when the creature's maw started to shift. Silver even managed to squeeze off a couple of shots at the monstrosity's indigo brain. Yet, it was too late. With sickening speed, the ice hippo launched from the frozen ground and leaped at Red. It caught his arm in its dull teeth, crushing the limb in the process. Like a rabid dog killing fowl, the monstrosity whipped Red back and forth. Manic screams punctuated by gunfire echoed through the grand metal hall. Silver shot a burst from his AR at the creature's mass, and somehow, through the agony, Red managed to squeeze off a couple of shots from his sidearm into the ice hippo's skull. All the bullets hit their mark, but it made no difference. The frozen monstrosity was not impeded by either of the weapons. What I was witnessing was maddening and incomprehensible. But the adrenaline that rocketed through my body made it no different from any other combat situation. Seeing my comrade in danger, I acted. With a sprint, I cut the distance between me and the incomprehensible. Once I was close enough to not miss, I squeezed off 2 shots from the pump action into the creature's maw. The first burst shattered a chunk of ice from the creature's jaw. The second completely unhinged it. Red came crashing to the ground, screaming and delirious. The ice hippo reeled back in confusion, its shattered jaw hanging uselessly. It roared in pain, a strange high-pitched creaking sound which betrayed the beast's gargantuan size. Without thought, I grabbed my screaming comrade from his nape and started to drag him to safety. I squeezed the trigger a third time, hoping to dissuade the creature from following us, but the shot went wide and hit the dark metal beyond. Although I missed, Silver was much more accurate with his plan of attack. As I dragged Red back to safety, the old soldier stepped out and threw a grenade. He landed the explosive straight in the creature's yawning maw. The explosion rocked the whole hall. By the time the frost settled, the ice hippo was just a pile of misshapen crystal and dark blue blood. The creature's jaw had the strength of heavy machinery. Red's arm was mangled beyond recognition. He was bleeding out fast. I helped Silver fasten a tourniquet, but it didn't do much to help. The damage from the hippo extended well past the affected limb. Red's uniform was drenched in blood, and the wavering tenor of his screams suggested he would never speak again. Saving the man seemed unlikely, but I had no intention of leaving him behind. At first, at least. As we applied the tourniquet and lifted the dying man to his feet, another sound broke past Red's harrowed screams. Outside, a familiar high-pitched wail could be heard. Another ice hippo. Multiple ice hippos. We dragged our comrade through the tight metal passage. Once we got out into the frigid Antarctic wind, his fate became unavoidable. Even if we were alone, Red's chances of survival were slim. There were some basic medical supplies on the ship, but they were sparse and far. The walk to the icebreaker was at least half an hour, and we were all capable of moving on our own. Dragging the man would slow us down considerably. Were we alone, there was a chance that Red might have survived the journey. Yet, we were not alone. From the depths of the ice rose more of those crystalline monstrosities. With dull maws of horrid strength and pulsing azure organs, they lumbered towards us. I begged Silver to let go of Red, to leave him to his fate. Yet the old soldier would hear none of it. He refused to abandon a member of the patrol. Even as the life drained from Red, the old soldier insisted we at least try to save our comrade. The ice hippos outside moved more sluggishly than the one we'd encountered inside of the metal dome. Were the two of us simply to run, we might have escaped them. Even as Red's cries simmered down into groans, however, Silver refused to let go. I helped him drag the man for as long as I could. Yet when one of those frozen monstrosities was just a few paces away from us, I let go. Red fell off the walkway and onto the ice. Limp. Dead, perhaps. Although we were being pursued by beings beyond comprehension or explanation, Silver's rage cut through the panic. He roared in fury and demanded I pick Red back up. As my commanding officer, he ordered me to do so. Silver ordered me, yet he never finished his order. The nearest ice hippo let out a haunting howl into the wasteland. A blast of something horrid left the beast's frozen jaws. Before Silver finished off his order, he disappeared beneath a gust of freezing dust. A terrible pain spread up the right side of my face. The crystalline monstrosity's attack inflicted the kind of agony that scars a man for life. And yet in that adrenaline-fueled moment, I could see the world clearly with my one good eye. Silver stood before me, with Red dead in his arms. They were both frozen in place, turned immobile by the ice hippo's terrible breath. For a mere moment, I could see my old comrade's eye twitch. He was frozen, but he was still alive. The stinging pain surging through my skull washed out any hopes of rescuing Silver. It obliterated any semblance of cogent thought in my head. All my body could do was run. All it could do was run and scream and beg the Lord for survival. I don't know how I made it back to the icebreaker. I do not know what I said to the Estonian captain or to the brass back at base. I recall little from the moment I started to sprint back to the ship. All I know is that I spent about a week in treatment at the research base and was then sent off back to civilization to receive proper medical care. I spent months in Europe at a facility connected to my employers. The surgeons did their best to salvage the parts of my face that wasn't lost to frostbite. The officers questioned me over and over to try and bring some semblance of an explanation to what had happened. The shrinks did their best to bring a shred of calm to my soul. I spent months in recovery, yet by the time I was deemed fit to re-enter the civilized world, I felt no better for it. With a sizable payout for my service and silence, I packed up what little of my life I had and settled in Florida. I never wanted to feel cold again. I wanted to get as far away from any semblance of ice or frost and never have to think about what I'd witnessed. Thoughts of the horror would not leave me, and the few bits of respite I would get in my waking life would worm their way into my dreams and consume me in terrors of the night. I drank, and I smoked and harmed my body in many other ways in attempts to forget what I saw in that terrible black dome. With enough intoxicants, the memories would become distant, but they would never truly leave. wasn't until I found myself confronted with a cackling youth in a gas station that the memory of that terrible day truly re-emerged. I thought I could keep my cool. Thought I would just smack the kid around and teach him some respect. The moment he threw his slushy at me, however, control over my body left me. Yes, I was back in that frigid hellscape. I was back before my 2 dying comrades, helpless to save them. I was back in Antarctica, staring down at a terrible amalgamation of animal and ice. I was back, and I couldn't help myself.
And so concludes this episode of the United People's Institute of Science series. Thank you for commenting and liking the video, and a special thank you to the patrons such as Kus, Bob Konderg, CR Iptid, Christopher Barunda, Dante Kincaid, Matthew Trahan, Mr. CreepyPasta, Daniel Wengel, Quiet Pills, Charlie Cooper, Joyce, Paul Evans, Shion, and Hayden Solomos. If you'd like to join these fine folks in supporting the arts and getting early access to content and your name in the credits, mosey on by patreon.com/MikeJLanger. That's it from me this week. Hope everyone is safe, sane, and healthy out there.